board staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory, we sit down with Wayne Biggs Jr., CEO of the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, to discuss the Southshore Trade Zone and how it could transform St. Croix into a hub for economic growth and investment. The Waste Management Authority is facing new challenges after a fire at the facility of its latest trash collection contractor disrupts operations on St. Croix. Plus, 3 former members of the governor's cabinet are facing federal bribery and wire fraud charges. We'll discuss the details, and later, a closer look at the Compensation Commission's recommended pay raises for top government officials and the questions surrounding how they took effect. Stay tuned as this week's panel joins the conversation to analyze these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. The Southshore Trade Zone on St. Croix is a major initiative by the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, designed to attract investment and spur economic growth in the territory. Spanning over 300 acres along St. Croix's South Shore and strategically located near deep water ports and the Henry Rosen Airport, it's being promoted as a hub for international trade and industry. Businesses operating within the zone are eligible for significant tax incentives, including up to 20 years of exemptions on corporate and personal income taxes, customs duties, property taxes, and more. Benefits that aim to make the Southshore Trade Zone an attractive destination for industries like manufacturing, renewable energies, and logistics. The EDA held its inaugural Southshore Trade Zone Investor Roundtable in October, highlighting the program's potential and recognizing its first approved applicant.
We are honored to be the first applicant and recipient of the Southshore Trade Zone. As an Enterprise Trade Zone recipient, we are also proud to be a part of the accelerated program. As part of that program, we also became a Specialty Food Association member, and we were able to travel to New York and participate in one of the largest food trade shows in the world.
Beyond this place of infrastructure development, there has to be a sustainable future for the Virgin Islands economy, and Mr. Wayne Biggs and the EDA are helping to steer that future in. Thank you so much.
Joining us now to share more about the Southshore Trade Zone and its potential impact on the territory's economy is Wayne Biggs Jr., Chief Executive Officer of the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority. Welcome to Comes with the Territory, Mr. Biggs.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Mr. Biggs, can you start by giving us a brief overview of the Southshore Trade Zone, how long this initiative has been in development, who first proposed it, and what motivated the decision to pursue it?
Yeah, we worked with Senator Francis for about 5 years before we actually got the legislation to where we wanted to get it passed, and it was passed. It's the newest toolbox tool that we have in reference to economic development and diversifying the economy here in the territory. So after 5 years, it became a reality, and now it allows us to go out and service this zone and advertise this zone as a place for manufacturing, transshipment, hotels, assembly, and a variety of other products.
Now, what makes St. Croix's South Shore the ideal location for this initiative? How does its existing infrastructure and the overall accessibility contribute to the zone's potential success?
You're right on target in regard to geographically. When you look at St. Croix sits pretty much in the middle of the Caribbean chain. And as a result, it's easy to get to Latin America, South America, North America. In addition, we're exempt from the Jones Act, so our boats can move back and forth. So anybody that's looking for Caribbean markets, Latin American markets, South American markets, St. Croix is ideal. Additionally, we do have the infrastructure with the deep water ports that we have. We've also done a feasibility study in reference to creating a shipyard within the trade zone. And we're shopping that feasibility study around now to investors to see if we can get anybody interested in building that shipyard. The feasibility study indicated that it was feasible for us to create a shipyard here in the territory, which would be one of the only shipyards under the U.S. flag.
Now, the trade zone is expected to drive economic growth and create jobs for the territory. You just spoke about the feasibility study and that shipyard, but what other specific industries or sectors also stand to benefit the most?
Definitely transshipment. Without a doubt, transshipment is a big part of it. Warehousing, where again, because of the infrastructure we have, all of the delivery entities are within the trade zone area. Additionally, our cargo ships come into that area. We have our cargo planes coming into that area, and we have all of the private shipping companies, the UPS, the DHL, the FedEx, all of those are within the trade zone area. So it's prime location for moving products in and out of the trade zone. And the beauty with the trade zone is you don't pay taxes on those products until they get to market. So you can move product in and out without paying taxes and import taxes and custom duties.
And I was just about to say, significant tax benefits are included in this. That's a 20-year exemption on corporate and personal income taxes, customs duties, property taxes. With how these incentives are structured to attract businesses, what kind of industries are those same industries as far as the shipyards, the FedEx and everything? Are those the industries that you're specifically targeting?
No, we're targeting assembly. Right now, we're working with a company, hopefully, that assembles solar panels. So they bring components from all over the world, and they put those components into the panel. And now, based on the value added, because we're under the U.S. flag, they can mark those panels as made in the USA, although the components come from all over the world. So we're pursuing an assembly company that does solar panels. We're also pursuing a hotel. We have interest right now of a hotel in the airport area for 136 rooms in that area. And also we're pursuing some other businesses that we're very early stages, but one of them is a construction materials type company that creates prefab and modular construction. And that potentially could bring construction costs down here in the territory.
Interesting. Now, during the Southshore Trade Zone Investor Roundtable that happened in October, what were some of the key messages that you shared with business leaders, and which industries showed the most interest in investing in the zone?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say we had about 10 different companies or representatives from companies from around the world. So it was our introduction to the world in reference to the trade zone. We've had an agricultural company that's showing a lot of interest now in relocating here to the territory. As indicated, we've also have this company that assembles solar panels. So it seems like there's two good bites as a result of that roundtable. And that roundtable hopefully will become an annual event where we can show the territory off to more and more investors.
All right. Now, bringing it locally, In the Mix Cakery was recognized as the first approved applicant under the program. How does this bakery's success reflect the goals of the trade zone? And how do you plan to encourage more local businesses to take advantage of these opportunities?
Yeah, In the Mix, as they indicated, they're in our accelerator program, and they've been wanting to increase exports to the U.S. mainland and other areas. So they were really prime in regard to getting into the trade zone, and they were early in regards to that. We're working with them now, hopefully, to do some financing for them so they can see that their dream come to reality. But they plan to, in addition to keeping the store that they have currently, they want to develop a manufacturing plant and a teaching facility where they can export cookies, cake mix, frostings, a variety of different things that they have the intellectual property for to the U.S. mainland and other Caribbean islands.
Now, what are the next steps? I know you spoke about all of the businesses that have expressed interest. Are there some other next steps right now as far as the Southshore Trade Zone's development?
Our next steps really is continue to map the trade zone, laid out exactly where we see it. We're working very closely with Port Authority because most of the property in the area belongs to the Port Authority. So we're doing sort of a mapping and looking at what assets would fit best. Our industrial park is within the trade zone, so we're looking at expanding our industrial park also. But for us, it's really to go out and show off the assets that the territory has and to show that we're open for business and we have a variety of tax incentives that's very attractive to entities here. Additionally, recently the legislature passed a bill that will allow WAPA to sell their excess solar power they have directly into the trade zone without the PSC regulation. So we expect production costs and power costs to be significantly less than that area in the very near future.
All right. Now, how is the EDA going to measure the overall success from the South Shore trade zone? Like, what are some of the milestones that you're aiming for over the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, we use a variety of different things. I mean, we have a cost benefit model that we use, and we look at the investment that's done into the area. We look at the employment, and of course, we look at the fact that the success that businesses have in the area. So there's a variety of different matrices that we plug into a cost benefit analysis, and it tells us, you're giving up this amount of tax benefits, but as a result of that, you've gotten this amount of return on investment for giving up those taxes that you're giving up. So it's a give or take, and again, the ratios that come out will determine whether it's successful or not.
Now, we can't talk about the EDA without talking about the Economic Development Commission program. Speak to me about how the EDC is performing overall.
The EDC is doing pretty well. I mean, we always would love to do better, but we've increased our EDC portfolio about 22% over the last 2 years. So we've seen significant increase. There continues to be a lot of interest. We're seeing actually smaller companies now, but the Virgin Islands is in demand. We're seeing a lot more financial companies coming in. So I think we're in a very good position. We continue to market and continue to push the EDC wherever we can. But we anticipate that we're going to have a banner year once again. We have about 92 beneficiaries in the program that are active right now, and we have roughly 12 certificates that have been approved but are not been activated at this moment. So we're trying to get over that century mark and then continue to grow the EDC.
All right. Now, Mr. Biggs, tell me, what can residents anticipate or see coming out next from the EDA?
Wow, that's a good question. I will say the next big project that we're working on is probably the agro-processing center in Frederiksted. We recently purchased a building in Frederiksted, and we're going to be creating an agro-processing center in downtown Frederiksted that will also have a test kitchen, will also allow for individuals to create value-added products there, and we'll also have a tasting room, a small restaurant, and we'll do some teaching in reference to labeling and marketing, how to get your product out, how to successfully export your product if you want to export your product. So that's really the next big project I think we have going right now.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have to bring you back to speak about that when that does come to fruition. Again, Mr. Biggs, I want to thank you so much for coming on and for speaking with me. It was a pleasure, as always.
It's a pleasure being here, and I look forward to coming back as those projects get developed.
All right. And coming up, we'll hear from this week's panel. But first, let's take a look at the issues on the table. This was a scene at Just Right Trucking in the early morning hours of January 12th. Multiple trucks and heavy equipment up in flames. Evidence points to arsonists trespassing onto the company's Orange Grove facility and deliberately setting the fire that destroyed 3 garbage trucks, 2 dump trucks, a backhoe, and an excavator, according to the Virgin Islands Fire and Emergency Medical Services. The owner of Just Right Trucking believes that arson is tied to a recent contract they secured with the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority.
It's self-explanatory. What else can it be?
Just Right Trucking's new contract with Waste Management involves trash collections for about 25 neighborhoods on St. Croix.
This was an emergency house-to-house collection because of the situation that occurred with our previous contractor. We're doing a 6-month contract now, and then we're going to put it out for a 2-year contract.
The authority's previous contractor, James Bates of Bates Trucking, told WTJX in December that he had to sever ties with Waste Management and lay off several employees to save his business due to the authority's failure to pay him.
This is it from December 31st. Is the last day. So I won't be able to pay my employees if I don't put them off right now. So I say I have to done with them and done with the struggling trying to get paid all the time.
Waste management officials estimated the debt owed to Bates at a little over $700,000, but Bates disputed that amount, claiming it was, quote, way more than that. As Waste Management works to resolve its past financial issues, the recent fire has compounded its ongoing challenges with trash collection on St. Croix by disrupting its new contractor's operations.
We are trying to put this thing together to figure out what's the next step in order to continue providing the service. We don't want to say that we're out, we are not 100% out, but we're done. We're done, but we're not out.
Despite the setback, Just Right Trucking and Trash Removal, a family-owned business on St. Croix since 2003, remains determined to fulfill its commitments using its remaining equipment.
Just Right Trucking is not going anywhere. Things like this, all they can do is make you even stronger. They can slow us down, but for sure, they're not going to stop us.
Good morning.
Former Management and Budget Director Jennifer O'Neill, former Police Commissioner Ray Martinez, and former Sports Parks and Recreation Commissioner Calvert White appeared in district court on January 10th, the same day White resigned to face federal bribery and wire fraud charges. The three former officials, along with government contractor Benjamin Hendricks, are accused of taking bribes from David Whitaker, founder of the cybersecurity firm Monethos Pro Support. Ray Martinez, who resigned as police commissioner in June of 2024, is accused of accepting more than $100,000 in bribes. Court documents allege these included equipment and labor for his restaurant in progress, Don Felito's Cook Shop, private school tuition for his two sons, rent payments, expensive meals, and tickets to sporting events. In return, Martinez allegedly directed VIPD officials to ensure Whitaker's invoices were paid and approved a sole source contract for Whitaker to provide technical case support for the police department. Martinez faces 5 counts of honest services wire fraud, 1 count of bribery involving federally funded programs, 1 count of money laundering conspiracy, and 2 counts of obstruction of justice. Former OMB Director Jennifer O'Neill, who also resigned in June of 2024, is accused of accepting at least $17,730 in bribes from Whitaker. The indictment alleges that Whitaker paid her restaurant lease directly to the landlord to conceal the scheme. In return, O'Neill is accused of approving payments for Whitaker's invoices and instructing OMB staff to facilitate those payments. She faces 5 counts of honest services wire fraud, 1 count of bribery involving federally funded programs, and 1 count of money laundering conspiracy. Calvert White is accused of accepting a $16,000 bribe solicitation and a $5,000 payment from Whitaker to secure a contract for installing security cameras at sports parks and recreation facilities. Court documents claim White concealed the scheme by using Hendricks to facilitate and receive the bribe payment. White and Hendricks are both charged with 1 count of honest services wire fraud and 1 count of bribery involving federally funded programs. Federal investigators have cited extensive evidence to support the charges, including recorded conversations, text messages, multiple terabytes of data, and millions of pages of documents. All 4 defendants pleaded not guilty on January 10th and were released pending trial.
And I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of Senator of the 36th Legislature of the United States Virgin Islands.
The members of the 36th legislature took their oaths of office on January 13th, marking the start of a new legislative term. Moments after the ceremony, they moved straight into their first session, where some senators used their allotted time to address the controversy over salary increases for top government officials, a topic that has drawn both public criticism and legal scrutiny.
I never asked for no raise. None of us asked for a raise. None of us. None of us asked for a raise.
Time.
But I'm glad the conversation came because it really showed me what many people feel about and think about us.
Although we all may deserve it, no pay raises at this time. No pay raises for top-level government officials until the economic landscape of this territory changes for the better of us all.
The salary increases were recommended in the Public Officials Compensation Study, a report prepared by the Virgin Islands Public Officials Compensation Commission, an independent body tasked with reviewing and proposing adjustments to public officials' pay. Under the law that established the commission, the legislature had 90 days to review and act on the recommendations in the study. If no action was taken within that time frame, the proposals automatically took effect. At the center of the debate is whether the recommendations were submitted to the 35th legislature, which did not act on the report during its tenure. The Compensation Commission claims the report was emailed to key officials, including then Senate President Novo Francis Jr. in August of 2024, but Francis denies receiving it. The Senate's legal counsel concluded that the salary increases are not legally binding on the government or the legislature if the Compensation Commission did not submit its report and recommendations to the Senate President as required by law. According to Government House, the raises took effect on January 1st. The salary adjustments included an increase to the governor's pay from $150,000 to $192,000. The lieutenant governors from $125,000 to about $168,000, and the attorney generals from $145,000 to roughly $168,000. Other top officials, including commissioners and agency heads, were also recommended to receive raises based on their roles and responsibilities. The commission clarified that senators did not receive a pay raise and that the $95,000 figure referenced in the report reflects the current salary of the Senate president, with no changes recommended for legislators. Joining me on set to break this all down is former Senator Donald Ducks Cole. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
And from our St. Croix studio, please welcome Attorney Keith Walker, founder and managing partner of Walker Legal, and former Senator Neville James, who hosts the popular radio show Analyze This on WTJX FM 93.1. It's great to have you both with us. Let's dive straight into the news of the day, beginning with the recent fire at Just Right Trucking and its impact on the Waste Management Authority's trash collection on St. Croix. Now, to start, Bates Trucking stopped collecting trash for the Waste Management Authority after being owed more than $1 million, which led to layoffs because they couldn't sustain operations without payment. Bates, however, continued servicing public housing under a separate deal with the Virgin Islands Housing Authority. Instead of addressing its debt to Bates, the Waste Management Authority hired Just Right Trucking on a 6-month emergency contract to take over house-to-house trash collections. Now, some are arguing that this move was unfair to Bates, who is still being owed money, while others see it as a straightforward business decision by Just Right Trucking to fill a gap in service. Now, with the arson attack on Just Right's trucking facility, trash collection services on St. Croix has been disrupted again. Now, Mr. James, I want to ask you, do you think it was unfair to Bates Trucking for Just Right to accept the contract, potentially allowing Waste Management to avoid resolving its debt?
For me personally, I think both things can be true. The fact that it was unfair to Bates and Just Right filling a gap. Having said that, though, I think it's totally unfair to what happened with Bates. And I had a conversation with him on Parade Day down in Frederickston, and these are the numbers that he gave me. Waste Management Authority owes him $1.6 million. And they told him that in the latter part of 2024, they would be addressing that. And when they did, they gave him a payment of $100,000. This is what he told me. In other words, this is akin to me owing you $160 and walking up to you and said, take 10. It doesn't really affect what I owe you. And that's not good management. That's number one. Number two, the one question that I would have for Just Right is this. If, in fact, the Waste Management Authority is in significant arrearages to Bates Trucking, why would you want to entertain that contract, knowing that they owe Bates significant money for the same service that you are going to provide? That is risky, So what I don't like about it is we're getting the impression that we're pitting local businesses against each other, and I don't like that because they're here to provide a service for all of us. We need a healthy and clean environment. But the way this whole thing came about And it's all about economics and money. It simply seems that we need to get our situation together in terms of revenues, and we need to allow the Waste Management Authority to do as they were mandated to do back when it was created, I believe in the latter part of 2003, early 2004, via legislative mandate.
Mr. Cole, I want to ask you, do you think this was simply a business decision and it had no connection to Bates whatsoever?
I think it was a business decision on Waste Management Authority. They wanted to continue the picking up of trash. The fact remained that, and Neville spoke to it, that you're going to enter into a contract with an entity that is not paying bills. I remember at the Public Services Commission when I was there, the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority utilized that same technique. They owed Trafalgar money, and then they went and entered into another contract, right? And nobody gets paid. And that's basically what is a big problem. I never spoke to the fact of the mandate by the Waste Management Authority. The legislature who passed the bill, created that, went back and removed the section of the law that gave authority to the Public Services Commission to put the WF fund in place. And it was a fund that would generate money to support the Waste Management Authority. The thing is, they don't have any authority. The Public Services Commission don't have authority to put that WF fund, the waste user fee, in place. And that was a portion of it that was supposed to do that. Thus, the Waste Management Authority is totally dependent on the general fund for carrying out its mandate. And we know the general fund, as we refer to it, is a black hole. And there's not a lot of money in the general fund. So that's where the problem is.
Now, Attorney Walker, the public might be wondering where Waste Management is finding the funds to pay Just Right Trucking for this emergency contract, and whether it would have been more practical and fair to use those funds to begin addressing the debt owed to Bates. Now, at the same time, another issue that highlights, a recurring concern about Waste Management's handling of trash and its contractors. In December, the owner of Marco St. Croix, he stated that he would not remove his garbage bins, garbage-filled bins, or the excavators that were closed at the Mombiju bin site, despite requests from Waste Management Authority, citing unpaid debts and ongoing legal disputes. Now, this is raising broader questions. Why does Waste Management appear to have an ongoing pattern of not addressing its financial obligations to contractors, leading to this service disruption and ultimately trash pileups that spill into the public eye?
Because the waste management issue itself is the issue. So we generate more waste in this territory than the average location. It's something to the tune of 460 tons per day and around 9 pounds per person. That's every adult, every child in the territory generating on average about 9 pounds of trash every single day. The waste management issue itself is too large for the Waste Management Authority. I think it should be clear to everyone that Waste Management Authority doesn't have the resources to manage the waste that is generated in the territory among its other functions and responsibilities. So this dispute involving Bates, I completely empathize with him. This arson with Just Right, I completely sympathize with them. But all of this is just the manifestation of really what is the underlying and much larger issue, which is the fact that we have a waste management problem that the Waste Management Authority cannot afford to manage.
Now, Mr. James, Darrell Griffith, the interim executive director and CFO of Waste Management, has pointed out that the Virgin Islands is the only U.S. territory where residents don't directly pay for trash collection. Do you think that it's time for that to change?
Well, in listening to the conversation, there is one thing that I want to say in fairness to the Waste Management Authority. Waste Management Authority happened to be created at the same time that the energy crisis that has been in the territory for over 20 years began. So what had happened was, right, from a political perspective, the Waste Management Authority finds it hard for the last 20 plus years to implement the fees that they were mandated to implement, given the exorbitant price, the excessive price that we pay for energy. So this is really the product of a WAPA issue. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying our circumstances are what they are. So, in fairness, I thought if they had implemented the fees and were collecting these revenues, they would be in a better financial position. Would it be enough of a position for them to sustain themselves? I don't know. But what I do know is that we got to fix our energy crisis, and that would alleviate a lot of problems that we deal with. And former Senator Doug School is acutely familiar with that, having been executive director of the Public Services Commission with his background and also being a member of the PSC board.
Now, Waste Management has stated that it costs about $23.5 million annually to manage garbage collections across the territory. And because it doesn't generate its own revenue, it relies entirely on external funding. Now, Mr. Cole, how sustainable is this model?
The model is definitely not sustainable because there's not a funding source. The funding source comes from the general fund. Like I said, the legislature enacted the legislation, and I want to repeat it again. They place a WUF, a waste user fee, and that fee was supposed to be where they generate the money from to pay. Ms. Sonia Neltrop, who was the executive director at that time, I forgot the other lady out of St. Croix. They came before the PSC. I was a member of the PSC. We went through a thing and created a fund. It was egregious on some people, because you had individuals that came and testified. If I have a big traco, and they were paying like X amount of cents per pound, and I have a traco with a lifespan of about 20 years, I have to pay a fee up front, and I'm not going to get rid of that traco for another 20 years. So the ability of balancing that situation reached a height, and politically, the political thing came in. The legislature that created that fund went and repealed that section that created the fund. Thus, how are you going to generate revenues? The legislature has to come back, and the community have to understand that we have to pay for waste collection. Everything, the waste that we have in the territory is imported in. We import basically 95% of everything that we consume here. And that trash has to go somewhere. The fact remains, we need to have a funding source outside of the general fund, or else it's going to be problematic.
A hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift our focus to the recent federal indictments of former VIPD Commissioner Ray Martinez, former OMB Director Jennifer O'Neill, and former Sports, Parks, and Recreation Commissioner Calvert White. While we acknowledge that individuals are innocent until proven guilty, these indictments are undeniably significant and warrant a discussion. Now, Attorney Walker, how do these charges affect public confidence in the Bryan administration, especially considering the accused held leadership roles in critical agencies like law enforcement and budget management?
When you review the allegations in this case, they really speak to actions that were allegedly taken by individuals, not actions that were taken within the scope of their work, not actions that were directed by anyone in the administration. They were very personal actions that were taken allegedly by individuals and who may have abused, their power and authority. I think it definitely impacts the public perception of not just the administration, but the territory, because of course these are federal funds. And in addition to any concern that our local community may have, we also have the larger concern when dealing with the federal government and their desire to continue to send recovery funds to the territory. So it's definitely an issue, but the allegations don't speak to there being any pattern of conduct with the administration, or that any of these actions were taken at the direction of the administration itself.
Mr. Cole, with Governor Bryan, now in his last 2 years, How does these circumstances impact his overall legacy or, his ability to do so, to create a lasting legacy?
Well, the fact that I agree with Attorney Walker as to the fact that Bryan administration itself did not direct anybody to do these things, at least from my concern. The legacy of an administration based on the people who you have working for you, it's tied to you. Administrations in the past have had individuals who have been charged, convicted, and served jail time, and we can look at those legacy. Governor Bryan's legacy, I believe, is going to be tied to what he did while he was in office, how he handled the COVID issue, how he dealt with the WAPA issue, which is troubling and continue to be troubled, how we deal with economic involvement, tourism, and that aspect, growing the economy. That's where I believe his legacy is going to be. It's going to be tainted in the event these individuals who are charged are now convicted, that under your administration, members of your administration were convicted of these illicit crime. Okay, so I think his legacy is going to be more than that. He's going to be tarnished.
Yeah.
But his legacy should be overall as to what he did in terms of economic development and growth for this territory.
Now, Mr. James, mismanagement and abuse of federal funding may be more common on the mainland, but in a small territory like ours, it feels especially explosive. Should we consider establishing a government accountability office to address these issues, or would it be more effective to strengthen the Inspector General's office to ensure audits lead to meaningful action?
I believe every jurisdiction should have a government accountability office. That's just me. I think that exists in Congress. And if it exists in Congress, it could exist on local levels. Strengthening the Inspector General's office, I'm out for that because that provides another level of security and oversight, which is what I really want to get to in this discussion. I want the public to know, right, for the record, right, I'm very good with Ray Martinez, very good with Calvert White, not as good with Jennifer O'Neill. So this is personal for me. My biggest frustration with this is how they allowed a documented lawbreaker going back decades to come into the Virgin Islands and pretty much work his way, weasel his way into positions where he could have this kind of influence. That's my biggest concern. I don't really want to pile on because it's easy to pile on, right? They've rendered a plea of not guilty and they presume innocent until proven guilty. But having said that, my biggest concern is that we look like we're a target. Ms. Ventura Douglas, former Senator Cole, Ms. Walker enter the audience, where folks can come into the Virgin Islands and pretty much wave what they want to wave in front of us, tell us things, and we buying it. I think back of an article, a Wall Street Journal article, where Jeffrey Prosser stated back then that you could get wherever you want in the Virgin Islands. This was a 2000 article, 25 years ago. If you know who to talk to, what cow what teeth from a cow to tap into, all that craziness. And here we are, a quarter of a century later, and we're still dealing with this. My biggest concern is us letting down our guard and being negligent and allowing these frauds from where they come from, failures from where they come from, coming to the territory and having access and actually encouraging us and getting us involved in things that is impacting us. And we're a small community. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows everybody. So that's what's the most painful thing about this whole, scandal, for the lack of a better term.
Now, Jennifer O'Neill and Ray Martinez both resigned in June of 2024, shortly after the Virgin Islands Consortium reported on the federal investigation. Mr. Cole, do you think these resignations would have happened if the media hadn't brought it to light, or would they have continued to serve?
I tend to believe after the media brought it to light, you had no choice but to resign, or the governor had no choice but to ask for their resignation, because the position at which these individuals sit, and like I say, everybody is innocent until proven guilty, or high level. You had the top of the enforcement arm of this government, the police. You have the management and budget where the funds are funneled through. Basically, I believe the news media did a job, got it out, and the governor had no choice.
Yeah. Now, Attorney Walker, both Jennifer O'Neill and Ray Martinez's have businesses that are connected to the alleged fraud. How might these charges impact their businesses moving forward? We do see O'Neill's business has remained open and operating, while Martinez's Don Filia's cook shop appears to be moving rather quickly with its construction. I see it every day. What are your thoughts on the potential business implications for both individuals?
I mean, there's definitely a risk of a clawback. You see where the federal government already, or the U.S. Attorney's Office already went and forcibly removed equipment from the business that's owned by former Commissioner Martinez. So there's a risk there, but I have to say this, and this is piggybacking off of what former Senator James just explained. With the amount of federal funds that is now circulating in the territory is a target. It is a target of the Whitakers of the world, and is also subject to a heightened level of federal scrutiny. And when you read these allegations, there's certainly a level of entrapment there, especially with former Director O'Neill, who seems to have been entrapped not just by Whitaker, but possibly by former Commissioner Martinez. And I think what the public needs to understand, and what the government officials need to understand, is that even if you don't think something is wrong, if there's a whiff, if it remotely smells funny, you have to avoid it, because there's just an unprecedented number of federal agents. There's an unprecedented number of federal scrutiny we're being subjected to simply because of the amount of money that's floating around in the territory right now.
Don't forget, we had this wiretap issue, right? And I believe it was in the Office of Management and Budget. And I believe that kind of, heightened, that something nefarious might be going on. And that might have actually been when this whole thing started. And here we are now with a stain on the Virgin Islands. And that's something that we don't need. And I'm just frustrated that, our leaders allowed, David Whitaker, whoever he is, Manitos, to work his way into the Virgin Islands and get us into this, something that has reflecting poorly on the territory. That's my biggest concern, the territory's perception by those who are looking at us.
Now, Attorney Walker, I want to ask you, with the indictment of the former police commissioner who held the highest law enforcement role in the territory, we're talking about scrutiny of these federal dollars, but could this indictment also prompt closer scrutiny of contracts, agreements, or even criminal cases that were handled during his tenure? And what kind of scrutiny, what form might that scrutiny take, and the impact it could have on the public trust of the police force?
It's far-reaching in several aspects. One, it invites more federal investigations. We would have to assume that every contract he touched is now being scrutinized, number one. Number two, with regards to local prosecutions, you better believe that criminal defense attorneys are now asking, as part of the discovery request, which is the receipt and exchange of evidence, whether Mon Ethos was at all involved in the investigation of those individual criminal cases. So it makes the job of the VIPD and the DOJ even that much more difficult when prosecuting crimes that may have occurred at any time during this Mon Ethos fiasco. So, this particularly with the indictment of the former commissioner of VIPD, it does have ripple effects. Similarly, with the former director of OMB, there are ripple effects because presumably that office was involved in the distribution of funds and other contracts that are now subject to scrutiny.
Mr. Cole, Ray Martinez has filed a lawsuit against David Whitaker, now accusing him of being a career con man. Now, a simple Google search would have told you this. But does this lawsuit could it appear to be an effort by Martinez to kind of defend his reputation? Or does it now raise questions about his own judgment and, his own decision-making skills or processes.
The fact that Mr. Martinez has filed a case against Manitos, it seems to be like a quid pro quo kind of stuff. You said this about me, I'm going to say this about you. The fact remains, Mr. Martinez's case, I don't think his filing is not a criminal filing.
No, it's a civil.
No, it's a civil suit. But Mr. Martinez filing by the federal government is a criminal suit. So when you juxtapose both of those, I think that Mr. Martinez seems to be the one who is most impacted, because Mr. Whitaker has already, I think his plea and is now being used by the federal government as a witness against Mr. Martinez. So that is something that we really have to look at. The court system is going to be dealing with that, one civil, one criminal.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say in terms of Mr. Martinez at that level, we have citizens in this territory who look to the police department for protection. When someone at the top is accused, how does that ripple down to our children, people in the street? If they're accused of doing this, then why should we be trusting of the agency that is put together to take care of us? It creates a problem for me, and the citizens of the territory trust. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to bring that trust back.
I know we can continue this conversation, but we do have to continue. Now, the indictments of former public officials comes at a time when the public is already scrutinizing and criticizing recent pay raises recommended for top government officials by the Public Officials Compensation Commission. Now, the Compensation Commission's report was emailed to then Senate President Novo Francis in August of 2024, but Francis has stated he never received it. The Senate's legal counsel has concluded that the salary increases are not legally binding if the Compensation Commission failed to submit the report to the Senate President as required by law. However, the law does not specify how the report must be submitted. Given the significance of this report, Mr. James, you were once a Senate President. Should the Commission have taken extra steps, such as hand-delivering it with a signed acknowledgement of a receipt to ensure it was properly reviewed? Or should the Senate President have reasonably known the report existed, especially since, as Senator Dwayne DeGraff mentioned, that members of the majority approached him in December seeking support for wage increases and requested his absence from the session to present the proposals without objection?
As relates to the Compensation Commission and the salaries dispute that we're dealing with, right? I would have preferred a hard copy, right? But we're living in a advanced technological world, right? So a lot of things are transmitted via email, right? I happen to be the Senate President in 2016 when we enacted Act 7878 that established the Virgin Islands Public Officials Compensation Commission. And there's a part of this that folks are ignoring, right? That was done in 2016. Apparently in 2020, the governor submitted a budget to the legislature for fiscal year 2021. And in that budget, he outlined, or was line itemed, that salary raises were going to be in effect for, ironically, Calvert White, who was the lowest paid commissioner in his cabinet. And according to Act 6905, senator salaries are attached to the lowest paid commissioner. So they knew, right, that a salary raise was going to be in effect for 2021. What happened was certain senators didn't like where they ran in the primary in August of 2020. So after that, one of their political moves, which they were entitled to do because it's self-preservation, right? They claimed they got senators in the legislature who know that they're getting a raise. And that's what created this problem today, because they reacted to what was Act 7878, establishing the Virgin Islands Public Officials Compensation Commission, by enacting what was subsequently Act 8384, which was replete with errors. And the biggest error in Act 8384, Ms. Ventura Douglas, is that the legislature abdicated its responsibility as it relates to setting salaries for the governor, lieutenant governor, and themselves by saying that if the legislature don't act on the report submitted by the Compensation Commission, non-action is tantamount to affecting law. That is the most suspect language that I've ever seen in legislation. Former Senator Cole and I have spoken about this and analyzed this. And if there's one act that needs to be repealed, it is Act 8384 because of that language. 7878 merely established the Compensation Commission. And, this is totally unfortunate. It didn't have to be like this. Deadlines were missed. I don't know how they're going to reconcile it, Ms. Ventura Douglas, because the governor said the salaries got into effect January 1, and the legal counsel of the legislature said the salary changes ain't binding. So that means that the judicial branch might have to weigh in as the ultimate arbiter for this particular dispute.
Now, Attorney Walker, I want to get your take on some of the statements that Mr. James just noted, but then also I want to ask you, do you believe the proposed pay raises for the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the attorney general are necessary to attract and retain top talent, as the governor has argued when he, told the public about this?
I mean, of course, the salaries for the commissioners, the higher they are, the greater pool of candidates you will have to choose from. So I that makes sense. For the governor and lieutenant governor, I think there's other incentives and other reasons why people run or campaign for those positions. So I don't think that argument applies to those two offices. But going back to what former Senator Neville James just explained, who, by the way, I think former Senator James needs to be an attorney in his next life, because he breaks down his arguments in a very legal, methodical fashion. But he's absolutely correct. And the problem that is going to happen if there is an attempt to repeal that act is whether repealing it will be retroactive, because the pay raises have already gone into effect. So when you parse the legality out of the arguments that are being made against the pay raises, which are more emotional driven, more principle driven, legally, the executive branch executes the laws that are given to it. And in this instance, that's what the law did. And the law essentially allowed for the pay raises to go into effect. There was no requirement for hand delivery of the report. There was no requirement for town halls or some sort of public presentation of the report. And quite frankly, on that commission are two lawyers who I respect highly. I consider them to be highly intelligent lawyers. And I'm sure that there was some sort of discussion amongst that commission when they transmitted the report as to what transmittal is under that specific law. So what you have is a situation where there was a law enacted and the executive branch has complied with it, and the raises have gone into effect. And any attempt to repeal, any attempt to walk this back will likely be unsuccessful, because I cannot see how legally it could be applied retroactively.
Now, the Compensation Commission was tasked with evaluating the salaries of senators, but their report only analyzed the Senate president's salary and recommended no raises, while excluding other lawmakers entirely. Mr. Cole, do you think the commission missed the mark by recommending pay raises for top-level officials and excluding, what do you think the rationale was for excluding the entire lawmaking body?
I believe that the commission erred in its evaluation of the law, and the law stated as you just stated. And what I look towards, I heard Senator Blyden on the floor the other day when they were swearing in, the devaluing of a senator and the senators in the legislature. That you can look at the compensation for the governor, the executive branch, give them a salary and look at the senators and what are you telling the senators? Listen, you guys don't worth as much as a senator. We have a unicameral legislature here. I served as a senator, former Senator Neville James, he served as a senator. It's a hard task. Now, I must say that when you go into the Senate, you know what the salary is when you go in there. But the work assigned to a senator, and you look outside of the territory, they do zonings, they do everything. Unicameral legislature. And the culture of the Virgin Islands, going back to the years, over the years, is that the legislature is supposed to be blamed for everything. Because you see your senator every day, you see them in church, you see them in the supermarket, they come to you 24/7. The fact remains, I believe that they missed the mark, devaluing the legislature's ability to do the job that they're supposed to do.
Now, Mr. James, I want to ask you, Mr. Cole just spoke about Senator Marvin Blyden passionately addressing the backlash over the rumored $10,000 increases for senators. Something that he says, that they hadn't even requested. They didn't point out that the governor's raise is $40,000, which drew far less public backlash and outcry, like Mr. Cole noted. But I want to ask you, there's been a historical backlash with political risks faced by senators. And when it comes to the discussion of as far as increases, was Senator Blyden's speech justified, his expression of frustration, or do you think it could lead to potential backlash in the next election, as what has happened to some senators in the past who may have spoken about raises?
Marvin Blyden was 100% correct. And I'm going to break it down numerically, and I want to thank my good friend Kiwaka for the compliment with respect to the legal, vernacular and all that stuff. But everybody knows I'm a numbers man. Prior to 6905, governor made 80,000. The lieutenant governor made 75,000. Senators made 65,000. Governors, the senator's salary was tantamount to 81% of the governor. If this recommendation goes through, you're going to have the Senate president at 95,000. You're going to have the governor at 192,000. That means that the senator's salary has reduced from a percentage standpoint from 81% of the governor down to 49%. Senator Blyden is completely correct. And I want the people of the Virgin Islands to do me a favor. Start defending your senators more, because you have easier access, as former Senator Cole mentioned, with your senators than you do with the governor and lieutenant governor.
All right, and that's all we're going to be able to get from you, Mr. James, because that's all the show we have from you today. So be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. In the meantime, for your news updates, tune into the WTJX news feed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. For all of us here at WTJX Toronto 12, take care.